I have actually found the cheapest deck you can play in Rush Duels, and it is this deck. As you can see, there is not a single effect monster in this entire deck, and every single card in this deck is obtainable without needing to spend a single gem. The entire deck revolves around this skill, which we'll have a look right now. Blue Falcon Formation, I'll call it BFF. This skill can be used if you have at least 6 level 5 or higher normal monsters with 1400 or more defense in your deck, in which we are playing 9. And it contains no level 4 monsters other than Warrior, Fairy, Wing Beast type monsters. So, you can see in our deck we are actually playing a lot of level 3 or lower monsters because those are not restricted by the skill. The requirement is that it can be activated during the turn you have summoned a level 4 or higher normal monster with 1300 or more attack or 1400 or more defense. And then you can choose one face-up monster on your opponent's side of the field, and it loses 800 attack and defense. This is a really significant attack reduction, or also defense reduction, if that doesn't really matter. So you can basically beat over any single monster in the game with your vanilla monsters, in which we're playing 3 of our kind of boss monsters, we could say. They're all vanilla, so I don't have to talk about their effect. We're playing Gaia because it's a warrior and it's level 7 and it has a high attack. We're playing Max Raider. It's just Gaia, but better because it has 24. It is a bit less than Dragia's, which is kind of a big deal because Dragia's could beat over it during your opponent's turn. But you can just summon another Max Raider during your own turn and use your skill to beat over your opponent's boss monsters. For our level 5 and 6 one tribute monsters, we're playing Blue Falcon Tengu. This is the best target we could play in this spot. This is the level 5 or 6 warrior, wing beast, or fairy monster with the highest attack. So we're playing 3 copies. There is also another one that you might be able to play as well. It's another vanilla. It's called the whatever Hermit. It has no attack, which kind of sucks, but it has a really high defense. So if you don't have 3 copies of, let's say you don't have 3 copies of Gaia, so you want to use something as a placeholder, you might want to consider playing this card. So during your turn, you could set it face down, and your opponent will probably not be able to beat it unless they have one of the 2 tribute monsters. And for the rest of the deck, it's just low level normal monsters. We're playing Celtic Guardian because it's a level 4 warrior. And the rest of the deck is level 3 or lower monsters, which don't get restricted by the skill. So we're just playing a list of level 3 or lower monsters that have the highest attack. So a Mammoth Graveyard, Silverfang, Dragon Sage, a Lizard Soldier. These are completely free to obtain. That's why I'm playing it. If you have monsters that satisfy the skill criteria that have a higher attack or defense, if you want, you could play those cards. I'm just playing these cards just because I'm playing a no-gem version. I'm also playing 3 copies of Kusa, and because I just like this card. That's kind of it. There are better cards, but I like Grass. So yeah, that's kind of it for the deck. And for upgrades for this deck, you could play 3 copies of one of the level 8 warriors. Chimera Ruler is really good in this deck if you have it. So you could replace, say, Gaia with 3 copies of Chimera Ruler, because this solves one of the deck's biggest issues, which is that because we're playing all normal monsters with no spells and traps, this deck has a really hard time if your opponent sets 3 monsters and ends turn, because you don't really have a way to deal any battle damage to your opponent if they do that every single turn. So if you play Chimera Ruler, not only does it have a high attack that rivals an opponent's boss monster like Dragius, it also could attack directly if your opponent sets 3. So it can deal quite a bit of battle damage if your opponent is playing defensively. You can also play Pierce if you have this card, which gives your monster piercing, so you can also deal a bit of damage even if your opponent only has defense position monsters. And yeah, as you can probably tell, this deck, other than the fact that it doesn't have a way to deal with set 3 monsters, isn't really that good in facing against the popular boss monsters against something like a Dragius. It could beat over a Dragius pretty easily during your turn, but after your turn ends, your opponent can kind of just clear your entire board with Dragius. And if your opponent has multiple monsters aside from Dragius, they could easily just remove more than half of your life points in a single turn. And even if you are able to destroy your opponent's Dragius, they can just summon another one during their next turn or summon something else, and you will be very easily overwhelmed by more offensive decks like that. And also, another problem is that your main beaters are these high-level vanillas, and your low-level monsters don't have a lot of attacks. So even if your opponent only plays low-level monsters, the popular ones like Gazelle, which have 1500, your low-level monsters kind of cannot contest those monsters. Even if you're playing the low-level monsters that have high defense, you kind of can't really contend against your opponent's 1500 attack monsters, because most low-level monsters with high defense cap out at 1400. So you will always be relying on your big monsters to deal with even your opponent's level 4 lower monsters. Or you could activate your skill to reduce the attack of your opponent's level 4 lower monsters, but you're sacrificing the target for bigger monsters your opponent might have. So this deck does struggle with that. But it's pretty good for a no-gem deck. You don't have to spend a single gem for this entire deck. And it does win some games even in King of Games, as I have discovered. So let's have a look at the replays. Our first game, we are going first. The game plan of this deck going first is usually just set a whole bunch of monsters. Even though your monsters have higher attack than defense, setting monsters turn 1 is usually your turn 1 play. We will set to Gaia, because Gaia actually has quite a high defense, which often catches people off guard. And also if you set it, your opponent can't reduce their attack or defense during their main phase, so they're forced to just attack with their own monsters. As you can see, they can't really beat over our monster, even though they have a Thunder Defender. They can't reduce our set monster's attack. We're gonna summon Gaia number 2, summon another Silver Fang, using our skill to reduce one of our opponent's monsters' attack, so we can beat over all 3 of our opponent's monsters, even with a monster with a bit of a low attack like Silver Fang. So we run into an issue, just like I have mentioned before. Our opponent sets 3 and we can't really beat over it. And what makes it even worse is that our opponent has a high defense monster that we weren't able to destroy, so they're going to be able to use it as a tribute for their high level monsters. They're going to make a level 6 plus a 7th road. That is enough to destroy both of our high level monsters, so they are going to do that. But they are leaving us with a Silver Fang, which is nice. We can use it as a tribute for our Max Raider, and then set another monster, tribute summon our Blue Falcon Tengu, activate our skill, reducing our opponent's attack. We're going to attack with all of our monsters, leaving with our opponent with 100 life points. So if they put anything in attack position, we're basically winning the game. They're going to try to clear our board with their level 6 monsters, which they are barely able to, but if we draw any single high-level monster, we immediately win the game, which we do. We draw a Max Raider plus a bunch of low-level monsters, so we are able to use our skill to beat over any one of our opponent's monsters and deal enough damage for game. Our second game is against Dragons, and we will be able to see another big challenge of this deck, which is facing against Dragius, because not only can that monster clear our board of set monsters or our boss monsters easily, because it has higher attack than any of our monsters, it also requires us to activate a skill to actually beat over it. So we're gonna see what we can do. Our opponent has a Summon Skull, which is not that big of a problem. It can only attack once anyway, and we could very easily beat over it with our boss monster. And as you can see, our opponent has a 1500 attack monster, which we can't really deal with, so we're forced to only attack the Summon Skull and leave the Samurai on their field, which they're able to use to attack next turn. They're going to make the Dragius, and unfortunately deal a whole bunch of damage. But we were able to clear it using our Max Raider during our own turn. And again, we are only able to clear the Dragias and not the other small monsters on his side of the field, so he can always use them as tribute for their next turn. They're going to make a 7th Road plus a 7th Road Witch, being able to clear our entire board of small monsters. And during our turn, we do draw a Gaia plus a 1 tribute monster, so we could get rid of both their 7th Road Magician and their 7th Road Witch. So we're going to do that, dealing a bit of damage in the process. And they're going to draw a whole bunch of cards. At this point, I think they're just trying to find a monster that outs both of our monsters. So they're trying to draw a whole bunch of cards using a Mystic Dealer, another Mystic Dealer, another Recovery Force, just trying to find a boss monster that clears it. And they don't find it, so they're gonna switch their monster to defense, but it's too late because the 2 Mystic Dealers on their field will be their demise because they're in attack position, which means we can just beat over them with our big monsters and we're gonna deal exactly lethal. Good game.